Welcome to This Week in Local, a Locology podcast featuring lively conversations about the local digital ecosystem, hosted by Locology analysts Mike Bolin and Charles Laughlin.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to This Week in Local. I'm Mike Bolin, joined by my co-host, Charles Laughlin. Hey, Charlie, how's it going?
Mike, it's going fantastic. Thank you.
Nice. So tell us what you're looking at.
Well, I was looking at something kind of just in the course of looking around for things to think and talk about and write about, etc. And Threads, and I'm going to make a confession. I am not a Threads person, but I was reading something about Threads, which is basically that Threads is doing something to attract, well, I should say Meta is doing something to attract creators to Threads. So, and what they're doing is they're offering sort of a bonus incentive thing and really targeting Instagram creators to come over to Threads to create. And if they're posts, I assume they're video posts, but not necessarily, I guess, because Threads is really more of a text platform. Any sort of any sort of post or creation on Threads that generates at least 2,500 views, I think, is a threshold to get that bonus. But what they're trying to create a financial incentive for Instagram creators to come over and start creating on Threads. And the implication of that is bring some of your followers with you to Threads, which kind of tells me that Threads needs more action, you know, and maybe it's not the X killer. It's sort of backing up a little. And sort of the timeline, this is post, Elon taking over Twitter, turning it into X, and I can't remember if this is before or after the rename, but Threads came on board, clearly is designed to be, I think the way I interpreted it at least, was smelling a little blood in the air, or sensing blood in the water, or whatever the correct metaphor is. Yeah, and let's create something to sort of capitalize on the weakness that was perceived at the time that, Elon had taken over Twitter. Let's create Threads. Threads had a big opening. I think it went to 34 million or 30 million users in a day. People like downloading the app or whatever it was. And so it was seen as like, oh, boom, we've got the X killer or the Twitter killer right here. And it just really hasn't turned out that way. I think they're up to about 150, 160 million monthly active users, but I think the daily active user numbers are around 10 million. These are round figures. Not nothing, but not X killer numbers. X is, I think, 550 monthly active 550 million, monthly active users, which I'm not sure what its peak was offhand, but it's down, but it's still much higher than Threads, and so Threads has not been the X killer that it was sort of set out to be. And I think I've joked on this podcast at least once that, I'm not an X user particularly either, and I'm not an Elon stan, even though I do have one Elon Musk brush with greatness story. I interviewed him once. We could get into that if you want. I don't remember much about it, and I'm sure he remembers even less. But yeah, it just really hasn't. So this whole notion of, all these people doing news podcasts and whatever, and at the end of the podcast, you'll say, oh, and where can we find you? And people will almost feel obligated to say, well, I'm on X or Twitter or whatever they're calling that thing now. And it's like, it's not that hard to know that it's X. And it's this sort of this performative sense that you have to do this. I'm not a supporting Elon dance, and I'm neither a fan nor a foe of Elon Musk, but there's that kind of performative thing that has always sort of gotten under my skin. So the fact that Threads hasn't destroyed X matters not to me, but I think it's interesting that it seems to have hit a wall. And now that it's having to sort of do this thing where they have to entice creators from another platform they operate that is doing pretty well, Instagram, they're kind of having to sort of prime the pump a little for Threads. And I'm just wondering, Mike, what your sense of how Threads is doing is, or if you have any takes on this.
Yeah, well, it's a classic sort of chicken and egg dilemma with users, creators, content. So they're trying to accelerate that process, accelerate the network effect, bring your friends with you, everything you just said. Right. But before getting into that, it's interesting. The sequence of events is interesting. So yes, and it's technically Instagram Threads. I mean, it's tied to Instagram. When you join Threads, you join with your Instagram.
No, yeah.
handle.
It's not like you're asking people to defect from Instagram or anything like that.
Yeah. And so that actually makes it, the onboarding is pretty easy because you use your same Instagram credentials. Anyway, so they had already been working on this, but once they smelled blood in the water with just sort of some of the drama happening when Elon bought Twitter, changed the name, a lot of people were defecting because out of like principled stances, and they didn't like Elon. I actually, as a quick side note, I thought that was a bit sort of self-defeating for a lot of people in thinking that like, oh, I don't like him, I'm actually going to turn my back on my 100,000 followers. And it's sort of like cutting off your nose. People
stop short of actually doing that. They just kind of
the people that did, they you know, cutting off their nose to spite their face. And
but there's plenty who talked a game and didn't end up doing it, I think.
Yeah. But those people, I think, were further emboldened to do that when Threads started to creep up, and they said, okay, well, I'll just use that. There's so much momentum. But then to your point, that momentum hit a brick wall, and those people are now thinking, maybe regretting turning their back on their 100,000 followers. And, you know, now they have 12 followers on Threads, or, you know, maybe that's a little dramatic.
To that point, you're right. There were people who made that move probably rashly in retrospect.
Well, right, but they could have done it without actually killing their account, and I think it was a bit dramatic. It was you said the word performative. I think I'm leaving X because, you know, my voice is important, and it's just like you're actually not that important, but you just killed your 100,000 followers.
You just made yourself less important.
Yeah. So the finality around it, they could have put their thing on pause. Or anyway, sorry, I don't want to throw too much judgment at people because everyone has the right to
but there, but I think we're both in agreement there was a performative aspect to a lot of this.
But the point, and the other point is that that momentum that everyone was like, wow, I'm getting on this rocket ship, and then it just sort of stalled. And it sort of plateaued, and since then it hasn't really grown that much, and that's fine. I use Threads. I like it. It's just an incremental channel. It's yet another channel. There's several channels.
Sure, no reason not to use it, in my opinion.
But it did not turn out to be the momentum and the growth rate that we saw in that first week just did not sustain. So
Which
there's that.
Makes you wonder about how many people are saying, "Oh, Threads, thank God it's here." You're here just in the nick of time, and you post a couple times and you scroll a couple times, and you go back to X quietly without announcing it to the world. And I think there's probably been a lot of that, or I don't know. I don't know if there's any behavior changing coming out of it.
Now X. To your point, at worst, it's this sort of doing it begrudgingly thing, but everyone realizes they have to be there because it's a network effect. It has the following it does. You have your built-in followers. The switching cost is high, and at the end of the day, those things win. So anyway, back to the main sort of thrust here, which is them attracting folks to the platform. Again, it's that chicken and egg thing. They want more creators. And it's interesting because though it's a text-based platform, just like Twitter is starting to do that same thing. I mean, there's the famous story of how Mr. Beast, posted one video on X to sort of test it out. And that was right around the time that Elon started to really sweeten the pot for content creators in terms of their rev share. And Mr. Beast, based on the scale he operates on, which his main channel is YouTube, was able to, I think he made like over 1 million on one post or something insane like that.
Right. Something only Mr. Beast could do, right?
You're right. Exactly. I mean, it's an outlier. So the question, and this all traces back to our main thing around SMBs, is what does it mean for them? And actually, I don't know, but I think it's definitely something to watch. SMBs probably have to go through the motions of building their own followers, which they have. It's hard for them to do. It's harder for them to do than most people because of their limited time, limited sort of affinity to deal with this type of stuff.
And SMBs often have a geographic orientation.
Right. So if they have 500 followers,
platforms like that don't really necessarily support that well.
True. True. It's fragmented by geography. And if they have 500 followers that it took them the last decade to build, they're suddenly not going to be like, oh, Threads, let me start that process over. And I don't want to slam Threads, but I'm saying there's a bit of a cold start problem, as in all these cases. That's I guess another way to put
a cold start that looked like a hot start, but ended up being just as cold as any other.
And not a cold start for Threads, a cold start for anyone joining a new platform.
No, I know what you mean. I know what you mean. But the point is, Threads looked like it was off to the races, and you build audience quickly there, and it just hasn't happened the way
Yeah.
the initial opening made it look,
Yeah, but back to your main sort of angle here, which is they are now like sort of attracting people with, like money talks, and,
Right.
we'll make it easier for you to, I think, one, it's reflective of what Elon did with the Mr. Beast thing. But number two, it sort of is telling, and I think you made this point, that like, they're having to resort to, 2-for-1 coupons, and like, when you see a restaurant start to do that,
it's an early bird special vibe. Yeah, there's an early, yeah. Yeah, it's got some happy hour vibes.
It doesn't scream like we're thriving when you start to see those things.
No,
and that's speculation.
But that was sort of the main reason I brought it up. It was to me, fairly or unfairly, you seem to be seeing the same thing, a signal that Threads is having a little bit of
they're running a Groupon.
Yeah, they're running a Groupon. I think I told you the story that the only one time I went skydiving was on a Groupon, which is sort of like, and I kind of made the comparison. It's like eating day old sushi. It's like, we really want to take that chance to save a little money. I survived, obviously, but yeah, no, the whole Groupon, it has Groupon vibes. It has that sort of, we're not the magnet for creators that we thought we were going to be after that first 24 hours where we had 30 million,
Now, in fairness, I go back and forth. In fairness, I mean, that's all fun to joke about that. In fairness, this is pretty inherent in having to like deal with that cold start problem, the chicken and egg problem. You get the creators who attract the users, more users attract the creators who are looking for reach. And, you sort of ratchet up in like a step function. Yeah. But it's hard to do that, and sort of these are some ways to throw fuel on it.
No, and it's easy to make fun of this. I mean, it's easy to make fun of a lot of things that really smart people are working really hard to get done. So I don't want to be disrespectful in that sense, because they're trying to build a platform here, and it ain't easy. But this is showing this, and the numbers. I think the numbers show it too. The 150 million. Globally, with 100 countries, they're active in, seems like a big number, but it's not particularly a big number. And then
to throw some shade at them, if anyone should be able to accelerate that network effect and get over some of those chicken and egg challenges, it's the reasons I said earlier, where the ties to Instagram and being able to onboard people using your existing credentials, and it has a sort of like brand equity to it already. Anyone just starting a social network that does not have those things and isn't like born on third base,
good luck with you.
Is going to have a lot bigger challenges.
Yeah. But even Meta is having trouble. I mean, we all know Google famously flopped at this, but and Meta's already built a couple of these. Well, they didn't build Instagram, but they bought it and they grew it substantially from where it was, and they built Facebook. They should know how to do this, but X is its own thing. The sort of text-based microblogging, it's his own thing. It's his own. And they, this is just a sign. And I think on the last earnings call, Zuckerberg kind of was talking up Threads a bit. I think it was in response to a question. Not sure about that because I didn't listen. I was just reading about it. But it was, I didn't hear the voice. I just read the words. I don't know if it was like, oh yeah, we're doing great, or if it was with more of a confident tone. I'm not really sure, but I get the sense that there's a little bit of white knuckling going on with this thing.
Could be.
Anyway. Okay, Mike, rather than dump on this further without really knowing what's going on at the level that we would need to say much more, let's just end it there. And why don't you read us out?
Yeah, and we'll keep watching Threads. Anyway, yes, thanks, Charlie. Thanks, everyone, for listening. This has been This Week in Local. Stay tuned every week for more episodes. You can find the show on all major podcast networks and find out more at locology.com. So please subscribe, like, and comment. Your engagement helps others find us. And if you're interested in being a guest or sponsor, you can email us at podcast@locology.com. So I'm Mike Boland with Charles Laughlin. Our producer is Dara Sweat. So thanks for listening, and see you next time.
Thank you for tuning in to this week's episode of Locology's This Week in Local with Mike Boland and Charles Laughlin. Be sure to subscribe for more.